I've been working at this homeless shelter in New Orleans for about 3 years now. It's tucked right behind the old charity hospital, which has been sitting empty and falling apart since Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. The hospital is this massive decaying building, tall with broken windows and graffiti all over the lower levels. During the day, it just looks sad and forgotten. But at night, especially when I'm on shift, it feels like something out of a bad dream. The neighborhood around here isn't great either. Lots of sketchy alleys, people hanging around who you don't want to make eye contact with, and random break-ins. I pull night shifts pretty often because the pay is a little better. And honestly, I'm used to the quiet. Or at least I thought I was. That night, Hurricane Ida hit, was different, though. It was August 2021. I remember the date, clear as day, because it was the 16th anniversary of Katrina, and everyone was on edge about that. The city was bracing for the worst. Winds were supposed to top 150 miles per hour, and they were telling us to evacuate if we could. At the shelter, we couldn't just close up. We had about 50 clients staying there, folks with nowhere else to go. Some with health issues, others just down on their luck. My boss asked for volunteers to cover a 24-hour shift, and I said yes. Figured I'd hunker down, keep an eye on things, and ride it out. I packed extra snacks, a flashlight, and my phone charger, just in case. The shift started at noon. Outside, the sky was already turning that ugly gray-green color, and the wind was picking up, rattling the chain-link fence around the shelter. We boarded up the windows as best we could with the plywood we had stored in the back. Inside, it was crowded. People were nervous, talking louder than usual, passing around. We handed out blankets, bottled water, and sandwiches from the kitchen. I spent the afternoon checking on everyone, making sure meds were distributed, and breaking up a couple of arguments before they got bad. By evening, the storm really kicked in. The rain hammered the roof like someone was throwing buckets at it, and the wind howled through every crack. Power flickered a few times, but we had a big generator out back that kicked on automatically. It was this loud, constant where that drowned out most everything else. Around midnight, things got intense. The building shook with gusts, and I heard trees snapping outside. One of the clients, an older guy named Earl, who'd been on the street since Katrina, kept muttering about how this felt. Just like before. "Water's coming," he'd say, staring at the wall. I tried to calm him down, told him we were on higher ground this time. But truthfully, I was worried too. My phone kept buzzing with alerts, flash floods, tornado warnings. I paced the halls, flashlight in hand, checking for leaks. The shelter is an old brick building, probably from the 1940s, with creaky floors and dim lights, even on a good day. That night, with a storm raging, every shadow seemed deeper, every noise sharper. By 3 a.m., the worst of it seemed to pass. The wind died down to a steady roar, and the rain eased up, but the power was out across the whole city. No street lights, no nothing. Just blackness. Outside, our generator kept chugging along, powering the essentials inside. A few lights in the common areas, the fridge, that sort of thing. I stepped into the main room to check on folks. Most were asleep or pretending to be bundled up on CS. That's when I noticed the frogs. Thousands of them croaking like crazy. It was the weirdest thing. In downtown New Orleans, right in the middle of the city. You don't expect that. But after a big storm, they come out from the swamps or wherever, and the sound echoes off the buildings mixed with the generator's hum. It was this eerie background noise, like the city was alive in a way it shouldn't be. I needed a break. I'm a smoker. Bad habit, I know, but it helps with the stress. Around 5 a.m., I told my coworker I was stepping out for a quick one. She nodded, half asleep at the desk. I grabbed my jacket and pushed open the back door. The air was thick and humid, still smelling like rain and wet dirt. The sky was pitch black. No stars, no moon, just heavy clouds. No city lights anywhere. It was like the whole place had vanished. I lit up my cigarette and leaned against the wall, trying to relax. The shelter's back lot faces right up to Charity Hospital, maybe 50 yards away. I've stared at that building 100 times on breaks, but in the dark like that, it looked even more imposing. Tall and silent, with vines creeping up the sides and windows like empty eyes. I took a drag and glanced up at it. That's when I saw the light up on the second to top floor. Maybe the 12th or 13th. Hard to count exactly in the dark. There was this flickering in one window. It wasn't steady like a flashlight or a candle. It was quick, irregular, like an old black and white TV screen jumping between static and pictures. Grayish glow on and off, casting shadows inside the room. I froze. Cigarette halfway to my mouth. The hospital's been abandoned for years. No one's supposed to be in there. It's fenced off, doors boarded, and cops patrol it sometimes because squatters try to get in. But with the power out everywhere, no way. And to get a generator up that high, someone would have had to haul it up flights of crumbling stairs in the middle of a hurricane. Impossible. I watched it for what felt like forever. The flickering kept going, a steady rhythm like a show playing with no sound. The frogs were still croaking loudly. The generator worried behind me. But everything else was dead quiet. No cars, no people. Just that light up there in the darkness. I thought maybe it was a reflection, maybe from our generator or something. But no, it was coming from inside. I pulled out my phone, tried to zoom in with the camera. But it was too dark. The picture came out blurry. Part of me wanted to walk over, check it out. But the neighborhood's dangerous. Even on a normal night, with the storm aftermath. No thanks. I finished my smoke, stubbed it out, and went back inside. Heart pounding a little faster than I'd admit. Back at the desk, I mentioned it to my coworker. She shrugged, said, probably just some homeless guy who snuck in before the storm. But that didn't sit right. The next morning, as the sky started to lighten, still gray, but not black anymore, the light stopped. Who's like that client started waking up, and I helped serve breakfast. Earl, the older guy, overheard me talking about it. He chuckled, real casual, like it was nothing. That's a ghost, man. Charity's full of them. Folks died there after Katrina, trapped on upper floors. They say the lights come on sometimes, replaying old times. I laughed it off, said, I don't believe in that stuff. But when I told my local friends later, guys who grew up here, they all said the same. Ghosts for sure, that hospitals haunted as hell. They shared stories. Nurses seeing shadows in the halls. Equipment turning on by itself years ago. It's been years now and I still work nights sometimes. I used to work the night shift at a gas station on a long, dark stretch of highway back in 2019. It was one of those lonely jobs. You're the only building with lights on for about 20 meters in either direction. Most nights were just me, a bad radio, and the occasional trucker fueling up. But this one night, a little after 2 a.m., things got weird. It was dead quiet. I was behind the counter trying to stay awake when the bell on the front door just slammed open. This girl comes stumbling in. I've worked some strange jobs, the kind that leave you with stories you can't quite explain. This one started on a quiet Tuesday night, back when I was pulling the graveyard shift at a gas station way out on a lonely stretch of highway. Nothing but desert and darkness for miles. Around 2 in the morning, the silence was shattered. Headlights cut through the night. A car pulling in way too fast, skidding to a stop right in front of the doors. A young woman, couldn't have been more than 20, scrambled out of the driver's seat and bolted inside. She was absolutely terrified. Her eyes were wide, darting around like a cornered animal. She was breathing in ragged gasps, clutching her phone so tight her knuckles were white. Before I could even ask if she was okay, she pointed a trembling finger out the window. "He's following me," she whispered, her voice cracking. I looked outside and saw it. A big, black, lifted pickup truck, idling menacingly, just at the edge of the light from the station's canopy. It had no license plates, and the windows were tinted so dark you couldn't see who was inside. The whole thing just screamed trouble. "Lock the door!" she begged, pressing herself against the counter. I didn't hesitate. I hit the button, and the magnetic lock clicked shut. She let out a small sob of relief. "I need to hide," she said, looking around frantically. "Is there somewhere I can go?" The only place was the single-stall employee restroom in the back. It wasn't much, but it had a heavy door and a solid lock. I pointed her toward it. "In there. It locks from the inside. Don't open it for anyone but me. You understand?" She nodded, still trembling, and practically ran to it. I heard the deadbolt slide home. Now it was just me and the truck. I picked up the station's phone and dialed 911, keeping my eyes fixed on the black monster outside. I explained the situation to the dispatcher. The terrified girl, The creepy truck. Everything. They said a trooper was on the way but could be 20 minutes out. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. The truck just sat there, its engine a low, predatory growl in the quiet night. It felt like it was watching me, waiting. My heart was pounding in my chest. I grabbed a heavy mag light from under the counter, the closest thing I had to a weapon. After what felt like an eternity, the truck's engine revved. It slowly pulled out of the lot, turning back onto the highway and disappearing into the darkness. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I waited another 10 minutes until the flashing lights of a state trooper S-car lit up the station. The trooper, a guy named Miller, came inside. I quickly filled him in. "She's in the restroom," I said, leading him to the back. "She's probably still pretty shaken up." I knocked on the door. "Ma'am, it's the gas station attendant. I have a state trooper with me. You're safe now?" There was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Ma'am, can you open the door?" Still. Nothing. A cold dread started to creep up my spine. Trooper Miller and I exchanged a worried look. He took over, banging his fist on the door. "State police, open the door." Silence. We both knew something was wrong. The door was locked from the inside. There was no other way in or out. No windows, just solid cinder block walls. Miller made the call. I'm kicking it in. It took him 3 solid kicks before the frame splintered and the door flew open. The restroom was empty. Completely empty. We just stood there, staring into the small, sterile space. The toilet lid was down. The sink was dry. There was nowhere to hide. It was impossible. She was gone. We searched every inch of that tiny room, but it was like she had just vanished into thin air. Miller got on his radio, his voice tense. An hour later, another call came in. They'd found the black truck. It was abandoned about 5 miles down the highway. Keys still in the ignition. And in the passenger seat, a backpack. The trooper who found it said it looked like it belonged to a young woman. Inside was a phone. It was the girl's. She had walked right into a trap, and I had locked her in the room where it all ended. I quit that job the next day. The memory of that empty room, that impossible disappearance, it never left me. A few years later, I was looking for a fresh start, something stable. I ended up taking a job as a corrections officer. I figured after the gas station incident, nothing could spook me. But he made a wise wrong. My first year, I was assigned to F Block, the oldest and grimmest part of the prison. It was a place where hope went to die, built in the 1930s. All cold steel and crumbling concrete. The inmates there were the worst of the worst. Lifers and guys who had given up on ever seeing the outside world again. The night shifts were the worst. The whole block would go quiet, but it was a heavy, watchful silence. My job during these shifts was the count. Every hour, on the hour, I had to walk the tier and make sure every inmate was in his cell, breathing. One night, I was doing the 3 a.m. count. The only sound was the jingle of my keys and the scuff of my boots on the concrete floor. The air was cold and smelled of disinfectant and despair. I moved down the line, shining my flashlight into each cell, marking off names on my clipboard. Cell 1, Ramirez. Check. Cell 2, Johnson. Check. Cell 3. Cell 3 was supposed to be empty. It was on the list for decommission, the lock broken for weeks. But as my flashlight beam passed over the bars, I saw him. A man was standing in the middle of the cell. He was tall and skeletal thin, wearing the standard issue orange jumpsuit. But his face, it was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were just dark, empty pits. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring right at me. My blood ran cold. I froze, my hand tight on my flashlight. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. There was no way anyone could be in that cell. I was the only one with keys to the tier gate, and that cell was supposed to be secured. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off him. I hurried to the officer's station at the end of the tier, my heart hammering against my ribs. My partner, a veteran CO named Dave, was there, sipping coffee. "Dave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "There's someone in cell 3. Dave looked at me like I was crazy. "That's impossible. Kid, that cell's been empty for a month. The lock's busted. I'm telling you, I saw him." I insisted. "There's a man standing in there right now." Dave sighed, grabbing his own flashlight. "All right, let's go look. You're probably just tired, seeing things." We walked back down the tier together. As we approached cell 3, I felt that same icy dread. I shined my light on the bars, steeling myself for what I'd see. But there was nothing. The cell was completely empty, just as it should have been. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight. I felt like an idiot. Dave clapped me on the shoulder. "See? Told ya. Graveyard shift plays tricks on your mind. Come on, let's finish the count." But I knew what I saw. It wasn't a trick of the light. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't shake the image of that man with the empty eyes. I tried to forget about it, but every time I did my rounds, I'd find myself hesitating before passing cell 3. A week later, I was sorting through some old files in the records room, trying to kill time. I stumbled upon a box of old inmate intake photos from the 40s and 50s. Out of curiosity, I started flipping through them, and then I saw him. It was a black and white photo, but there was no mistaking that gaunt face, the skeletal frame. The name on the file read inmate 734. According to the records, he had been an inmate in Effie Block back in 1952. He'd hung himself in his cell 3. My hands started to shake as I read the report. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty records room. I never told Dave or anyone else what I found. They'd think I was losing my mind. But sometimes, on the late night counts, when the block is dead quiet, I still feel like I'm being watched from that empty cell. And I make sure to walk just a little bit faster when I pass it. Some things you just can't explain, and some places you never really leave. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to follow for more at the very back. The room was empty. I'm not talking. He's hiding. I'm talking empty. I felt this weird chill go up my spine. I walked the length of the bathroom. I pushed open every single toilet stall door. Empty? I went to the shower stalls. They didn't have curtains, just small concrete dividers. I looked in each one. Empty. There was no other way out of that bathroom. No windows, no vents, big enough for a person. Just the one door I was standing in. He couldn't have passed me. I was standing right there. It was impossible. He walked in, and I followed him, and maybe 10 seconds later, he was just gone. I finished my count. I was shaking the whole time. My count was perfect, which meant every inmate was in their cell, exactly where they were supposed to be. There was no one out of place. The rest of the night, I just sat at the desk watching that bathroom door. At 6 a.m. when my shift finally ended, I was in the break room turning in my keys. One of the old-timers, a guy named Miller who had been working there for 20 years, was sitting there drinking coffee. "Rough night, rookie?" he asked. I hesitated. I didn't want to sound crazy. "Hey, Miller," I said, trying to sound casual. "Have you ever seen weird stuff inside?" He looked up at me, his eyes kind of sharp. "What kind of weird stuff?" I told him. I told him about the 2 a.m. count, the guy coming down the stairs, and how he walked into the bathroom and just vanished. Miller didn't laugh. He just took a slow sip of his coffee. He looked at me for a long second, and then he asked the question that I will never ever forget. "Was he tall?" Miller asked, his voice low. "Real skinny, with long dreads." My blood turned to ice. He just nodded. Miller nodded back, like he was confirming something. "That's Mr. Bones," he said, like he was talking about the weather. "Inmate named Samuels. He hung himself in the back shower stall about 10 years ago. He was tall and skinny, had those dreads." He paused and took another drink. "Don't worry," he said, patting me on the shoulder as he stood up. "He's just part of the night shift. He still hangs around." I just stood there. I still work in that prison. I've been promoted and I don't have to work in C Block very often. But when I do, and when it gets close to the 2 a.m. count, I find a reason to be busy. I don't look at that staircase, and I definitely don't look at that bathroom.